Pete Nakos on 3.com joins us now. Pete, great to see you. It's been a minute since we've had you on the show. Follow Pete on Twitter at Pete Nakos _. And you can, and subscribe to on3.com. But this morning I got up and read your survey about, this transfer window, this class. What was the biggest thing that jumped out at you, the common through line through no matter what conference you were talking to?
So not a surprise to me at all, but the biggest common thread throughout all of this is Texas Tech. I mean, what they did in this year's window is going to be talked about for a little while. What the reaction was from other conferences and well thought people in college football were just some like amazement on how much they stepped up and delivered, and they obviously have On3's #1 transfer portal class. So I would say that overall, that's like the #1 common thread that really jumped out. Beyond that, too, I mean, I thought we had some really great insight on what schools spent the most money, who were some of the top paid players, and then also a breakdown of like what a quarterback goes for, defensive tackle, offensive lineman, and things like that. I thought it was a good one. But yeah, what Texas Tech did really jumped out.
Pete, with Joey McGuire and company, I mean, it's clear it's championship or bust, right, with what they brought in. I mean, they've kind of been revving it up, and 8 wins, but now it's kind of like, I mean, this is championship or nothing, right?
So where I'm going to set the bar at is win the Big 12 title and make the college football playoff. I think that is probably where we're at right now, what the expectation should be for Texas Tech. I don't know what they do in the playoff, but they have everything they need to go through and win the Big 12.
Pete, you mentioned a lot of the quarterbacks in the article. Not a lot of, like a couple in particular, Darian Mensah and Carson Beck. Where did Duke decide to get all this money to go for Darian Mensah? And Carson Beck, is he getting more than Cam Ward?
So starting off with Darian Mensah, I would say that very early on, Duke made the decision. And when I say Duke made the decision early on, I'm probably saying in November, way before the portal opened, that they wanted to go get a top flight quarterback, and they thought that's where their money would be the most well spent. And they went out and got Mensah once the portal opened. I've heard that number is more around the $3 million mark compared to a $4 million that some people reported, but that's that. And then with Carson Beck, yes, he's getting significantly more than Cam Ward ever got at Miami. He's looking at a package that's well north of $3.5 million and could definitely eclipse that too, and possibly even double it if he checks off some boxes for the Hurricanes.
Pete, one of the quotes I saw from, I guess, one of the anonymous was Texas Tech effed up the market for everybody, basically. I just wonder, and we heard them brought up during Carson Beck, right? I mean, he very quickly signed with Miami, but there was that little 24 hours where it was like Texas Tech. And a lot of Tech fans said, well, they're being used as leverage because they're the big spenders, so now players are going to use them, say hey, Texas Tech might be interested. Do you think they're a leverage play now? And just how badly did they kind of screw up the market for everybody going dang, they've raised the bar. How much have they raised it in your mind?
They were definitely used as a leverage play. I do, when it comes to Carson Beck, though, I mean, there was some serious interest there for about 4 hours. When you look at what they've done and what they've done to the market, they went heavy on the line of scrimmage. And just talking with people, there were some situations where, let's say, an SEC school wanted to go get an offensive lineman that Tech was also heavily involved in. And if that SEC school wanted to get that player, they almost had to double what they wanted to pay just because of how aggressive Tech was being. And some people would say that, just because Texas Tech has the most money. No, it was a lot more of Texas Tech just wanted to be aggressive and make sure they got the guys they wanted to. And I know that comes with a lot of money, but I think it was more of an aggressive attitude that made them, the highest spender. It wasn't, some other situations when you deal with the top dogs of Ohio State and Oregon and Texas, where it's just trying to spend at that level can almost be impossible. I think Texas Tech separated themselves by just being really aggressive right off the bat.
So You also mentioned Auburn, FSU, and Nebraska. All like two of those schools did make bowl games. One of them barely did. And so, how much of that was desperation money, in your opinion, and how much of it was effectively spent on the target that they landed?
So let's not call it desperation money with Nebraska, but the reality of the fact is they have a quarterback that they think is, I don't want to call it generational, but they think Dylan Rayola is probably one of the better quarterbacks to pass through Lincoln in a recent memory. And they went all out and making sure there was an offensive line of wide receivers around him that could elevate his passing game. You mentioned Auburn. Hugh Freeze is entering an extremely critical year in his future. And I talked to Paul Feinbaum about this the other day. We got a story up on 3. He thinks Hugh can get this done. He thinks Hugh is the right fit for Auburn. But Hugh is definitely entering a year now where he's going to have to deliver on the football field, or there's going to be some big questions he's going to have to face. So I think that factored into the decision to go heavy in the portal. I also think that he learned from his lesson of, right, he didn't take a quarterback last year and rolled with Tate Thorne, and that kind of showed up on the field. The last school you mentioned was Florida State, correct?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think Mike Norvell is in I don't want to say he's in a situation right now where, like, if this year doesn't go perfectly, he's going to lose his job. But I think he definitely has to show some improvement from last year and at least field a winning record. And it's going to be really interesting to see how things pan out at Florida State, just because, they went heavy on the portal a year ago and that didn't pan out. So how does this year's portal class work for Mike Norvell?
Pete, in terms of, maybe not desperation is the right word, but is there somebody so far that you're surprised they haven't been more aggressive because of maybe their circumstances, and maybe you feel needs to be a bit more aggressive or is hurting themselves by not doing this? Anybody surprisingly not as big a part of the market?
So I don't think they need to, because I think they did a great job at the high school level. I thought Florida would be in the mix for some more guys. Just because of, they brought back Billy, Bagley's back. And, they did answer some questions in the portal. They brought in the wide receiver from UCLA, Sturt Van, and they put a really, really good class together in 2025 at the high school level. I just wasn't sure if they were going to, go get a couple more pieces in the portal, and that could definitely happen in the spring. So by no means was I stunned, but that was just one school that entering late November and December, I had circled as was going to be a major spender. And I think what they did in high school kind of filled some spots. So I don't want to say it was like a stunner, but that's one school that jumps out to me.
Yeah, I mean, are they kind of in a weird spot to maybe be a little bit choosy because of that? Like, they can say, okay, because they've done so well on the high school level, really the last 2 classes. I mean, Billy Napier was on the hot seat, but the last 2 classes has been pretty good. And with everybody wanting to play with DJ Lagway, can't they just be a little bit more judicious about who they pick?
Yeah, no, they can. And you're right. The return on investment in the high school ranks has given Billy the time and space to let that develop. I think there is this thought process, right, that, okay, Billy's back, they're going to spend a lot of money on their roster, and obviously they spent that on recruiting, and they'll do that in the portal too. I thought they were gonna, maybe get like really aggressive with another wide receiver or two, and they opted not to, and that's fine. But that's just one school I wanted to watch in December that maybe didn't live up to my expectations on what they were gonna do. But that's not to say that they didn't bring in a really talented class.
Pete, what is your thoughts on the House settlement, just kind of where we are with that and the impact that will or can have once everything does eventually become official? I mean, how much does this change things in your eyes, and how much does it, shake things up, I guess, a bit?
Yeah, so revenue sharing is supposed to start July 1, right? You have the big court approval is supposed to happen the same day as the NCAA men's basketball championship game in April. I think you really saw what revenue sharing is doing to the market in this winter portal cycle. I talked to a lot of people about that for this story today. Someone gave me a very funny example of how, for the first time ever, Wake Forest, right, they have like more money than ever to spend on the portal and things like that. And a school is like, yeah, we're not going to change what we're about because Wake Forest now has more money to spend in NIL than they've had before. I think the biggest thing for me in the next 18 months is going to be watching to see like how programs navigate the salary cap that's going to be put into place. And then also there's a lot of schools out there who are front loading these portal contracts that will switch over to revenue sharing in July. And how does that switch be made? Is everything going to fall under that fair market value that we always hear about? Things like that. So that's what I have my eye on right now when it comes to rev sharing.
That's part of Texas Tech, right? Was they got ahead of it and they saw the rev share coming, and they're like, let's go all in while we can before that. And then obviously they started getting more attention than they probably thought, and they're like, well, let's spend more money. But didn't they kind of see like that they threaded the needle, so to speak, and getting really aggressive now before all of the rev share becomes official?
Yeah, they thread the needle too, and they have a really aggressive NIL collective in the Matador Club, which is led by Cody Campbell, and then they have revenue sharing that's going to kick in, and yeah, they definitely thread the needle of trying to make those two marry up, and I think that had a reason to do with why they were so successful in the portal. But at the same time too, I think that having the deep pockets that they have with the collective really set themselves up for success as well.
Pete, what do you think the spring class is going to be like?
If it's anything like last year, it's going to be dull at times, with a lack of depth, with a few really, maybe one or two surprises. Talking to some of these collectives and staffs and stuff, everyone's going to want to look at a position, right? Mm-hmm. And that always changes team to team. I guess the biggest question is going to be like, how good is the talent level going to be? And obviously there's going to be that defensive tackle or offensive tackle or edge rusher who's good or has some sort of a track record that some school is going to overpay for. But if we're going to compare this upcoming spring to last spring, I'll just be very interested to see if they mirror each other, or if the spring is better or more competitive in talent or anything like that.
Do you think that they have done a better job with retention to get out ahead of those kind of things to where
1,000%? Yes. Yeah,
because,
I think that has a ton to do with it. And then you're also seeing some schools offload talent now in the spring portal.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's true. Yeah. To me, it would. It probably just has to be a reset from the coaching to set expectations of like, hey, you know that like you're going to compete for this job, right? Like this is not you come and so that's where it kind of gets weird to me is like some of these guys transfer and you're like, well, you didn't know that there's gonna be another left tackle like going at it with you like that. Why is that a surprise to you?
Yeah, the other thing we start to see in the spring too that I'm sure you guys have seen is the athlete who dares the school they're going to go in unless the school pays X amount of money, and then the kid ends up in the portal and is kind of screwed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because they're not worth that much money. The other schools are like, no, I don't. We know what
they bluff it. They bluff and say, well, I'm going to go get $500 million from half $500,000 from like school X, and then their current school's like, all right, man, take a walk, see how it goes. And then next thing you know, it's July and they still haven't committed anywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Pete, thank you so much for hopping on today. Go to on3.com, read the column, subscribe. Go to Pete Nakos on Twitter, Pete Nakos _ on Twitter to follow all the news that he breaks all the time. Pete, thank you so much. Great to talk to you.
Thanks, guys.
There you go. Pete Nakos on 3.com.